and welcome to the latest edition of the Public Sector I Heart You podcast. I'm Rebecca Davis, and today I've got the pleasure of being joined by Julie Towers, Director of Penna. Hello Julie, and thank you for joining us.
Hi Rebecca, thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your journey, both in local government and how you ended up at Penna.
Well, I always say I was sort of lucky really. I fell into local government like many people do, and I fell into recruitment. I started my working career as a YTS, if you remember, that's how old I am. So the YTS scheme, and I was doing badly at school. I'd just been planning to be a nurse because somebody said I might make a good nurse. And after 2 days in my first training programme, realised I wasn't going to be a very good nurse. So my mum said, well, you better get a job then. And I went for 2 interviews on the same day, one at Co-op Travel and one at Nottinghamshire County Council, who I'd never really heard of as a 17-year-old that didn't quite pay council tax then. Off I went and got both jobs offered me, which was fantastic. My mum said, oh, take the travel job because it's only 1 bus ride. And my dad said, oh, I think you should go to the council. They'll probably do better training. And he was right. So I took the job at the council and never looked back. And that's where my passion for local government comes from. They took me in without many qualifications at all, sent me to college for 2 years, and just had a fantastic YTS experience in the personnel department, as it was called then, and found my way into recruitment, loved recruitment as part of my personnel training. And after 3 years in the county council, the provider that worked for us, called Austin Knight at the time, you might remember, actually Birmingham-based business, they were our provider, they were our recruitment advertising company, and I asked if I could have a job, and they said no, that I wasn't experienced enough. But luckily, their competitor Riley offered me a job on the public sector team. So I left the public sector very early on in my career, but never lost my passion for it. And 30, 40 years later, I'm really old, I was really lucky to fall into a company that developed me for 17 years, and I left as managing director of the group and went to join a company called Tribal, who were a new company on the blocks, and they were sort of dedicated to building a public sector business, and I was lucky enough to join them as they started their growth. We bought 62 companies. And 10 years later then, when austerity started to bite, we disposed of some of the businesses, and I was chief exec there for 10 years. And then when we sold the business to Capita and to TMP, I had options and choices, but along the way I'd met Gary Browning, the chief exec at Penna, and I'd always loved Penna, HR business through and through. And so I joined them after I left Tribal, and I've been there 15 years now as managing director, and recently in sort of career planning stood down from being the managing director last year, and now still remain a director of the company, but doing what I love, which is recruitment.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fabulous journey from actually how local government can lead to many doors opening. And I think that's what we try and convey when we're engaging with young people in the sector. Now, I know within local government, everyone knows you, Julie. You're so synonymous with recruitment, but tell us about how you network, because that's, for me, the key, really, what makes you so passionate, is that you are known by everyone, you're able to network and connect with the people.
I always say it's because I'm really old, I've been around a long time, so you know a lot of people. I think I've just been really blessed to have some great mentors and supporters. And I think when you go into the private sector and you're in a recruitment business where obviously you're having to work hard to find clients and find candidates, the key, the knowledge is power piece for me is that you need to know people and you need to know the candidates. So I suppose networking becomes part of your approach. Not everybody likes networking, I get that. And I often do a lot of coaching with people to build, I like to call it finding people and getting to know people, because networking, the minute you say, people go, oh. So some people have said to me, well, you have to do it because it's part of your job. But I think if you lean into it and think, well, knowing people, I'm very nosy, Rebecca, so it helps me. I'm interested in people. So I don't see it as networking. I see it as listening to people. People are very generous with their time. They give you insights. And local government is a great network. People often fear it when actually it's a really friendly, warm network. So I've just been very lucky to work right the way across the UK. And when you're recruiting, of course, you meet lots of people along the way, some suitable candidates, some not suitable candidates. but you keep in touch. And a big part of my job, I suppose, and my strength is that I try and retain good relationships with those people, even if, you know, they don't get the job or they do get the job. It's about being in their network to support them. And, you know, I can assure you, people support you back. I've had nothing but support all the way through my career, and I would encourage anybody to make networking part of their day rather than seen as a big, I don't like networking.
Yeah, I think for some it sounds like such a big thing, doesn't it? So what's the sort of the top bits of advice you would give someone to think about networking, not just when they're ready to look for a career, but actually to make them better at their job?
I often say, you know, everybody should know a headhunter because, you know, that's how you get a new job. But actually networking, or as I call it, sort of, you know, learning, is about sort of, if you're in a piece of, you know, if you're in a professional area, knowing other professionals in your space is like the obvious thing to do, to reach out for help. And so my top tips are, and prior to LinkedIn would have been, you know, the rule of thumb is 6 degrees of separation, that we all are connected through 6 people. And if you play the game in a room of people, you can normally find a way to even President Trump, Barack Obama. It's amazing who knows who. So you've got to think, is there a value in it? If you don't value it, you won't do it. So I always look at it and think, well, who do I need to know, or what do I need to know about that would help me be good in my job, or help me have some insight that I haven't otherwise got? So if you see it as learning and you see it as research, you tend to do it. And the big one is put it on your do list. I'm a great believer that things that are in the atmosphere, like leadership, inspiring people, networking, these words we use, very rarely translate into our do list. But if you look at my do list, I always have some really weird headings like, you know, who am I going to find new today to meet? Which groups on LinkedIn am I going to join and listen in? So you make it part of your routine and it becomes interesting. You find things out. Knowledge is power in any industry, actually, and is good for you, as you say, not whether you're looking to get a job, but just generally to improve yourself and improve your networks. And those networks help you because referral, recommendation, who you mix with is important. It helps you. So I think you've got to see it as valuable, otherwise you won't do it.
Yeah, and I think that's really valuable to share, really. I think where we see local government is its strongest point is our ability to collaborate. And we saw that during COVID, particularly the ability to come together. We see that where there's a crisis, but local government has many challenges. So how do you sell the benefits of local government, and what do you see as its biggest opportunities?
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm a convert, obviously, but I can see the challenges and opportunities, and you know, I spend my days listening to people's challenges and opportunities. So I think from an attraction perspective and positioning of local government, you know, I've benefited from it personally, so I know the breadth of opportunities that are available and the support that's available in the organisations. But I also know that young people out there today, they don't know what their council is, they don't know what the council does. So there's a big job in helping people understand the breadth that local government does. And you know, from gardening to legal to management to, you know, one of my clients has got a zoo. You know, who thought there could be a zookeeper in a council? So I think we've got to raise awareness for people to understand what local government does. And I think COVID actually helped because we saw local government at its best. But I think local authorities have a job to do around employer brand. I think the sector always has a job to do around its brand. It doesn't have the sort of macro budgets that a civil service has or a NHS brand has, because everybody works with their local council in a different way. And if you're not a taxpayer and if you're 17, you probably, like me, I didn't even know the council existed before I went to see it. And even my mum, I can remember having a two-tier conversation at 17 saying, no, it's the county council, mum, not the district council where we pay our, you know, council tax. So I think there's always the opportunity. So for me, when I'm bringing candidates into local government, the purpose of delivering for local people, you cannot get closer to your communities than in local government. And, you know, young people and candidates are very driven by public purpose. So I think we have to absolutely get hold of that and really show that local government is a great place to start, develop and, you know, progress your career.
Yeah, and I know when making senior appointments, members particularly are very keen to have someone who's able to demonstrate a knowledge and understanding of communities and particularly their own locality. So how do you go about supporting candidates to sort of go for senior leadership roles to make sure they're prepared?
Yeah, it's a great point, Rebecca, because I think during COVID, we saw a lot of mobility, people, living in Aberdeen and working in Aylesbury through the online opportunity that it brought. But of course, as we've come through that, we are now wanting people to be returned back to the office for all the right reasons, to work together, to collaborate, to create a sense of sort of place and organisation. So for me, candidates, I always look for candidates that can find a connection. Because if you are just going to be a director or a chief exec anywhere, then your added value, your unique selling point is what? Whereas actually, if you're a good candidate, but you've got a connectivity and understanding, or you've immersed yourself in that place, you are going to be able to talk the language for those members, because those members, quite rightly, have been elected to look after their place, their communities. So understanding, I think, is important, doing your research, understanding the socioeconomics and demographics of the place, understanding how those communities live, the diversity in the community, the politics in the community. So the knowledge is very powerful then when you're presenting yourself or when you're writing your CV or application. It comes out that this is not just a job, it's a job for this place. Now, I sometimes think you have to grow your love for a place if you're moving there, but you do have to show your love for a place all the way through a process. So I always say to candidates, what's the connection? How does your heart feel about this place rather than just your head?
Yeah, and connecting is part of the business, really, isn't it? Around making sure candidates see those opportunities as beneficial to their own career as much as anyone else's. You work obviously a lot with councils, senior leadership teams. What do they often do well, and where is there some learning, shall we say?
In recruitment, generally, yeah. The best councils, and luckily I'm very fortunate to work with many councils that do this, but the best councils anticipate recruitment. It's not a reactionary thing. So we're able to work with them right at the beginning when they're just thinking about things, which means we can manage expectations, we can look at the market, you can advise them on salary, you can talk about what the market, talent market's feeling like. Whereas if you get the brief and it's like, we want one of those and we've already agreed that, and members of that, and then you go, oh, actually, do you know there's only 3 people in the country that can fit that brief? So I'm a great believer that, planning and preparation at the front end leads to a better outcome. So councils that think about their recruitment not just as a transactional thing, but as a strategically, how do we develop this role? Not do the sort of, here's the one we did earlier and repeat the job description, but think about what's changed. Context, technology, politics. Will the market actually deliver candidates? Have we been inclusive, or have we got language in there that's going to block people from different sectors or different communities? So really put time into the front end of the design, manage expectations, tends to create a better brief. And then my other one, which is a big bugbear, and my clients that listen to this will be going, yes, she does this. I insist, I'll try and insist, that the leader, if it's a chief exec or the hiring manager, really is involved in the process, because they are a selling point. And mostly my clients are great. They will take calls, they'll do teams, they'll meet candidates, because this is all part of the experience. Whether you get the job or not, you want a great experience. You want candidates to go away thinking that was a brilliant council. So many people say they're going to do it and some don't, and that always disappoints me. But the good councils will lean in, provide the time, the leader or members or officers will put time into it, because the advert, the search, the actual process is pretty straightforward in our industry. The difference is the personality, the human part of that, conveying value. So the good councils put time into it and don't think of it as a process, but as a experience, and they put as much time into the inputs as the outcome.
Yeah. And that's important for the council side. I suppose on the flip side of that, what are candidates looking for in those senior roles today?
It varies on the different areas, but generally there has been a rightful heightened interest in values and behaviours, and not what they say on the wall, but actually how they're lived, how they're experienced. So candidates will always ask me, what's it like there, Julie? What are the people like? What's the leader like? What's the chief exec like? How do they operate? Are they open? Are they transparent? And we're often doing jobs that are quite challenging, Rebecca, so often, we might be recruiting a chief exec to come into a council that's perhaps had intervention, it's perhaps had a difficult past, it's perhaps got financial pressure. So not always the jobs are beautiful, but they're jobs to be done, and people are motivated by that. So part of the key is finding candidates that are interested in your brief, because horses for courses. Some candidates want a change job, some candidates prefer a more stable environment. So my job is about matching. I always say it's like the Cilla Black of recruitment. You're trying to bring together the right brief, the right place at the right time with the right candidates. And that varies depending on sort of context and timing. But candidates, without a doubt, obviously they always want to know the hygiene factors, but broadly the right thing they ask about is, what am I going into? What am I inheriting? Are people supportive of the role? Are members behind the role? All of those things. So people are tuning in, I suppose, to making sure it's the right environment for them.
Yeah. And it's such an investment candidates make in the process, isn't it? It's very draining, very emotional in terms of the commitment you make. What advice would you give to candidates which are looking to go for those very top senior executive roles about how to give themselves enough time and space to prepare?
I always say it's a full-time job getting a new job. So you have to think carefully about really deciding you want to go for it. Occasionally candidates have to run at one or two if they're looking to move, and two come along at the same time. I often say, have you got the energy for that? Because it is a full-time commitment. I mean, writing your application, doing the prep work, doing the visits, doing your research, interview time. We ask candidates to make a video at the moment. We ask them to do assessments. They come to an assessment centre. I'll meet the leader. It's a lot of time. And of course, you're holding down a very important job already. So I often say to people, have you got the bandwidth at home? Have you got the bandwidth at work? And how are you going to help yourself through it? Obviously, part of my job is to provide lots of support so we can help them with that. But they have to know what they're entering into. And I always encourage people not to run for more than one, because I just think is impossible almost. And they won't give their best. So which job is really the one that's calling you? What is pulling you in? And focus on that. And I know I have candidates who've been torn because two jobs come along at the same time. So, but you've got to think about whether you've got the time and the impact that's going to have on you, personally. If you're holding down a big senior job anyway, your resilience is probably stretched to the full. How are you going to put that in and not let, your day job, get damaged? So a lot of it's about time and thinking, but also not sort of flirting with jobs and think, well, I'll have a look and see, but no, this is the one that really is right for me. So getting candidates to make some discerning decisions early on is helpful.
Now, local government reorganisation is on the horizon. What opportunities does that give the sector to try and retain talent and make sure we make it as efficient as possible for people to redeploy into roles?
Yeah, great question. And I've been LGR'd myself, so personally know how that feels. And it's a time of uncertainty for people. So you've got heightened emotions, you've got lots going on politically, and we've got a lot of uncertainty. So it's almost the worst dynamics you can have for a talent market. But of course it is becoming clear that the future is unitary, and so we're doing a lot of work with the district councils, who are obviously starting to think about how their candidates and their staff can make that transition, which is great to see. But also we are going to have another sort of resignation, bonfire of resignations as we had in COVID. We are going to see lots of redundancies potentially. Let's hope not. We can redeploy people and TUPE transfer. But for me, the winning strategy would be to have a sort of a really shared collaborative plan and approach to it. I can remember going through the talent clearinghouse and it being very efficient and matching me and introducing me to other opportunities. So there is something about how as a sector and indeed my own industry can support that. In the early 1990s, when we had some reorg, I know my company were involved in working with other competitors to have a sort of arrangement about managing internal appointments, because the last thing you want is to spend lots of money moving deck chairs around. You need, to do that efficiently. But I suppose the other thing for me is there's a big opportunity to do things completely differently in reshaping these new authorities, particularly around talent, where we tend to be competitive rather than collaborative. Bigger authorities maybe could make more use of the broader talent. And I think we will need to invest in people that are staying. My gut feel is there'll be, more jobs than people because we've got an ageing workforce in local government. So what are we doing to attract new talent, younger talent? So I'd like to see MHCLG and the sector work together to have a bit of a a sort of more joined up approach and hopefully get onto the shadow authority position a bit earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a huge opportunity there, which we've got that ability to control, and we shouldn't overcomplicate it. I think that's the key. Sometimes we just need to push through and
Yeah.
find those solutions. Now, I know at Penna you've done lots of research, particularly on appointments and where people are moving to, and some of that recently touched on district council chief execs moving into unitary authorities. Just tell me a little bit about that research and what it's showing.
Yes, we monitor the market throughout, and every quarter we publish our sort of movers and shakers across the top table. And I recently did the chief exec update with the MJ, and two things. One, turnover is at an all-time high. So you could say, is that good or bad? So since 2020, 81% of upper tier chief execs have been appointed. So turnover, through the roof. And you could say, well, that's terrible, isn't it? We're losing all this talent. It's not really the picture, because about 28% of chief execs were taking up another chief exec role. 38% of people were appointed internally. That's great news. We're seeing good succession planning. But the startling figure was that of the chief execs appointed, only 5 came from district council chief execs, which at a time of LGR makes you wonder whether, is that a real blocker or a perceived blocker? But, I'm a great believer that if you are a leader, a good leader, they are transferable skills. But clearly there's something in the district to unitary. Now, it could be the district chiefs haven't wanted to make that move, or it's become impossible because of the striking budget investment in children and adults and members feeling concerned about that. But I think with LGR emerging, we need to not waste talent. So for me, it was more startling that we need to make sure those district chiefs have got the best shot of becoming the new unitary chiefs if they want to. And what can we do to help that sort of talent move so that we don't end up then having to recruit externally, because the talent market is thin already. But obviously that figure was quite stunning for us to see. And, I think the headline said dead end districts or district dead end. I don't agree with that. Districts are not dead ends and the people in them aren't. But I think it does show up how the two-tier system perhaps has affected the talent market.
Yeah, I think there's different misconceptions, isn't there, and trends that go with appointments into senior roles over the years and where they fall. Another area which is obviously something we're very passionate about at West Midlands Employers is diversity and inclusion, and particularly making sure senior roles are more representative. That's something which I know you've done a lot of work on, and we've still got a long way to go, but what are the things which you're seeing are actually having a positive impact, and where do we need to do more?
Yeah, we have. I mean, sadly, we're nowhere near we need to be, but we are in a better place. I actually think since COVID, and I think sort of quite clear and action commitments have happened in local government and in private sector as well. I mean, I think it was good to see that I think 43% of boards, the FTSE top 100 are now female. And that was way below that level. It's still not 50%, which it should be, if not 52%. But we are seeing real shift, both commitment and activity to make that change. Sadly, in local government, I think because we've had an ageing workforce and turnover has been quite low, we haven't been able to move the dial as fast. So in a sense, the chief exec movement over the last 4 years should be celebrated, because it has changed the age profile and the gender profile significantly. It's not moving the ethnicity dial fast enough. And I think we've got a decade of those people coming through the system and developing themselves. And we are seeing much better diversity at director level and assistant director level. So maybe just with time and with turnover, we will see those people being supported through. But the commitment to diversity in our clients is immense, which is fantastic. It's a topic of conversation during the briefing. I think clients still rightly focus on getting the best candidate for the job, but actually that widening the search, widening the attraction, looking in different markets and different sectors to bring diversity in is very much a norm now, which is fantastic. Whereas before it was sort of, it was implicit rather than explicit. But authorities, and actually here in the West Midlands, you've got a fantastic record. I think one of the best in the UK for reporting. So, in the West Midlands region, and your female population and leadership is improving. So, if we work at it, we will get better outcomes. But I'm a great believer as well that you have to know your data to understand your problem and do something about it. So many authorities have discovered that, you know, they've got very diverse workforces, but they're lower down the management rungs, or they're you know, sort of stuck in the middle. I think a lot of London boroughs particularly, a lot of the diverse talent is sitting in the middle, and you have to know the data and why they're blocked, or are they blocked, or actually is it a perception, or is it their ambition? Because you can then intervene and support. And I've seen so many new programmes around supporting future talent, supporting diverse talent. So we're in a better place, Rebecca, but yeah, there's always a long way to go. And there are still, you know, I can count on my two hands, sadly, how many black chief executives there are in local government.
Yeah, and I think the data itself is something as a sector we've not been particularly good at when it comes to that workforce analysis. Unlike other sectors who look at the whole, we often focus purely on individual organisations. We are getting better at that, and that's allowing us to do more and have a business case for why we need change and what initiatives work. Moving on to sort of other sectors, which I know you also work with, where do you think local government sits compared to other parts of both the public sector or the private sector when it comes to innovation and recruitment? Where do we need to do more?
I mean, I think in executive recruitment, it probably sits comparably. I don't think there's much done sort of too differently in the private sector. I worked private sector for many years before moving to public sector. And actually the process, people say the process is more complex in the public sector. I don't think it is. I think it's more engaging, it's more inclusive. You know, where else would you go and meet partners and staff and stakeholders before you actually arrive? You know, in the PLC world, it's all done behind closed doors and nobody ever sees anybody. So I think from a sort of openness, transparency perspective, the public sector are far ahead of the private sector. I suppose it's probably more in the sort of employer brand, early careers attraction. Some of the large-scale private employers have the budgets and the brands with which they want to do really great work around attracting early careers, graduates or apprentices. And so, you know, there's some phenomenal campaigns around from, you know, the Army do a brilliant one, the Civil Service for the fast track used to do significant work. And I suppose the innovation is more about doing creative social media, very, very different sort of assertive campaigning, road shows. We had a client, we won an award for doing some street graffiti a couple of years ago that I can't quite see a local government doing it, but, you know, just using different methodologies to reach young people in their space. So probably stronger on social media, although I think local government have really adopted that. And probably using technology and AI, video, you know, online assessments. I mean, you know, we deal with thousands of applications for early careers. You can't possibly give the personal attention to those. So having the technology, the interactivity, the online capability, local governments sometimes struggle with because there are other competing priorities. Equally, I've seen some great innovation from local authorities and the LGA campaigns as well to improve local government branding, often down to budgets, Rebecca, really. And I don't think there's a lack of innovation. It's about the many things that local government have to do.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Julie. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Oh, pleasure talking to you as well. Thank you for the invite. All the best.